What if I told you that the ancient magical practice of embodying God forms, what the Egyptians called assuming the God form and the Greeks termed theurgy, is actually the most sophisticated psychological technology ever developed for human transformation? While modern spirituality tells you to find yourself, the ancient magi understood a profound truth: to become whole, you must first become the gods themselves. For thousands of years, initiates in mystery schools, from Memphis to Eleusis, practiced something that would make today's self-help gurus tremble with inadequacy. They didn't just visualize or affirm, they literally became divine archetypes, channeling the raw psychological forces that govern reality itself. These weren't mere religious ceremonies or primitive superstitions. They were precise methodologies for activating what I've termed the archetypal self, the deepest layers of the psyche, where individual consciousness merges with the collective unconscious. But here's what will shatter everything you think you know about personal development. The gods were never external beings to be worshipped. They were always psychological structures within your own unconscious mind, waiting to be awakened and embodied. The ancient magus, who could assume the form of Thoth, didn't just gain knowledge, he became knowledge itself. The priestess who embodied Isis didn't just understand love, she became the living force of cosmic love. Most people don't realize they're walking through life as psychological fragments, never accessing even a fraction of their true potential. You see, what passes for personal development today is like trying to fill an ocean with a teaspoon. People meditate for years, read countless books, attend workshops and seminars, yet remain trapped in the same limited patterns of consciousness that have defined their existence since childhood. The modern individual suffers from what I call archetypal starvation, a complete disconnection from the powerful psychological forces that could transform their reality overnight. Instead of embodying the gods within, they remain slaves to their complexes, their neuroses, their endless mental chatter that drowns out the voice of their deeper self. They're convinced that growth happens gradually, through small incremental changes, never understanding that consciousness can shift dramatically in a single moment of archetypal activation. Watch someone struggle with confidence issues. They'll spend years in therapy, trying to build self-esteem through positive thinking and affirmations. But the ancient magus, who embodied Horus, the solar god of divine authority, didn't gradually build confidence. He became confidence itself, channeling the archetypal force of solar consciousness that burns away all doubt and hesitation. The difference isn't just dramatic, it's the difference between trying to light a room with a candle versus flipping on a spotlight. Consider how people approach creativity today. They wait for inspiration. They struggle with blocks. They doubt their abilities. Yet the priestess who embodied Pota, the creator god, didn't wait for creativity to visit her. She became the creative force of the universe itself, channeling the archetypal pattern that brings all things into existence. Her consciousness merged with the divine blueprint that underlies all manifestation. This psychological fragmentation creates cascading problems that most people never even recognize. When you're disconnected from your archetypal self, you're forced to operate from the ego alone, that tiny defensive aspect of consciousness that's constantly worried about survival, approval, and control. The ego can only access a fraction of your true capabilities because it's cut off from the vast reservoir of power that exists in the collective unconscious. The hidden cost of this disconnection is staggering. People spend decades trying to heal trauma through talk therapy, never understanding that a single session of embodying a healing archetype like Asclepius could accomplish more transformation than years of conventional treatment. They struggle with relationships, not knowing that embodying Aphrodite or Eros could awaken the archetypal patterns of love and connection that exist beyond personal psychology. Even more tragic is how this affects your relationship with your own power. Most people live their entire lives never knowing what they're truly capable of because they've never accessed the God forms within their own psyche. They accept limitation as normal, struggle as inevitable, mediocrity as realistic. They've been taught that claiming divine power is arrogant or delusional, never understanding that denying your archetypal nature is what creates suffering in the first place. Why do conventional approaches fail so consistently? Because they work with the surface layers of consciousness, while the real power lies in the archetypal depths. Positive thinking tries to change beliefs at the conscious level, but archetypal patterns operate from the collective unconscious, where individual will has little influence. Meditation helps you observe your thoughts, but God form embodiment transforms the very source from which thoughts arise. The therapeutic model treats symptoms rather than activating the archetypal solutions that exist beyond personal psychology. It's like trying to fill a swimming pool with a garden hose when you have access to an ocean. The ancient mystery schools understood that true transformation happens when you stop trying to fix your limited self and start embodying the unlimited archetypal forces that are your birthright. I'm going to share with you 5 proven methods for embodying God forms that can transform your reality more dramatically than anything you've ever experienced. These aren't New Age fantasies or wishful thinking. They're based on documented practices from mystery schools, validated by my decades of research into the collective unconscious, and confirmed by modern neuroscience research on consciousness and identity. The ancient Egyptians spent lifetimes perfecting these techniques because they understood something that modern psychology is only beginning to discover. Consciousness isn't fixed. Your sense of self, your capabilities, your very reality, all of this can be transformed when you learn to activate the archetypal patterns that govern human experience. Recent studies in neuroplasticity show that the brain can be rewired dramatically through intense psychological experiences, validating what the mystery schools knew thousands of years ago. What separates those who achieve extraordinary transformation from those who remain stuck in patterns of limitation? It's not talent, luck, or circumstances. It's their relationship with the archetypal forces within their own psyche. The individuals who create breakthrough results in any field, whether art, business, relationships, or spiritual development, are those who've learned to channel archetypal energies, even if they don't consciously understand what they're doing. Think about the artists whose work transcends personal expression to become universal. They're not just creating from their individual perspective, they're channeling archetypal patterns of beauty, truth, and meaning that resonate across cultures and centuries. The entrepreneurs who build empires aren't just smart or hardworking, they're embodying archetypal patterns of creation, authority, and manifestation that existed long before they were born. When you learn these 5 methods, you'll never approach personal development the same way again. Instead of trying to gradually improve your limited self, you'll learn to step into archetypal identities that possess capabilities far beyond what your ego considers possible. You'll discover that what you call your personality is actually just a tiny fraction of who you truly are, a costume you've been wearing that you can remove whenever you choose. The journey we're about to embark on will challenge everything you believe about human potential, consciousness, and the nature of reality itself. You'll learn to access psychological territories that most people never even know exist, and you'll develop the ability to embody divine archetypes that can transform any area of your life. Prepare to discover that you're not just a human being having a spiritual experience, you're an infinite consciousness temporarily pretending to be limited. The first foundational principle that every ancient magus understood is this: your individual consciousness is just the tip of an iceberg, and beneath the surface lies an ocean of archetypal forces waiting to be awakened. But here's what most people miss about this truth. They think the unconscious is some mysterious, unknowable realm, when it's actually the source of all power, creativity, and transformation. Think of consciousness like a radio. Your normal waking awareness is tuned to one station, the ego station, that broadcasts your personal thoughts, fears, and desires. But there are hundreds of other stations broadcasting simultaneously, each one carrying the frequency of a different archetypal pattern. The God forms are simply these archetypal frequencies made conscious and embodied. Consider how a method actor prepares for a role. They don't just memorize lines and blocking, they study the character's psychology, history, and motivations until they can think, feel, and respond as that person. The transformation is so complete that audiences forget they're watching an actor and believe they're seeing the character. God form embodiment works on the same principle, but instead of becoming fictional characters, you're embodying eternal archetypal patterns that exist in the collective unconscious. Here's another way to understand this. Imagine your psyche as a vast theater with countless stages. On the main stage, your ego performs its daily drama of worries, goals, and relationships. But in the deeper levels of this theater, archetypal dramas are playing out continuously. The hero's journey, the lover's dance, the magician's transformation, the sage's wisdom. Most people never venture beyond the main stage, never realizing they have access to these deeper performances. Modern neuroscience has discovered something remarkable that validates this ancient understanding. Brain imaging studies show that when people engage in intense visualization or role-playing exercises, the same neural networks activate as if they were actually performing those actions. The brain doesn't distinguish between vividly imagined experience and physical reality at the neurological level. This is why method actors can develop the physical mannerisms and even accents of their characters. Their brains literally rewire to support the new identity. But the ancient magi discovered something even more profound. When you embody an archetypal God form, you're not just activating neural networks, you're connecting with psychological patterns that exist beyond individual brain structure. These archetypes carry their own intelligence, their own capabilities, their own ways of perceiving and interacting with reality. You're not just pretending to be a god, you're accessing the godlike aspects of your own deeper self. This is why the practice works in reverse as well, creating what we might call negative manifestation. When people unconsciously embody destructive archetypal patterns, the victim, the tyrant, the addict, they manifest the corresponding realities in their external lives. The alcoholic isn't just choosing to drink, they are possessed by the Dionysiac archetype in its shadow form, the god of intoxication turned destructive. The person trapped in abusive relationships isn't just making bad choices, they're enacting the Persephone pattern, the archetypal victim bride. Understanding this reveals why willpower alone is so ineffective for lasting change. You can't fight an archetype with your conscious mind any more than you can fight an ocean with a teaspoon. But you can learn to embody different archetypal patterns, essentially changing the God form that's expressing through your consciousness. This is why the ancient mystery schools focused on transformation rather than self-improvement. They understood that real change happens at the archetypal level. Think about a time when you felt most powerful, most capable, most aligned with your true nature. Perhaps it was during a creative breakthrough, a moment of passionate love, or an instance when you stood up for something you believed in. In those moments, you weren't operating from your limited ego self. You were temporarily embodying an archetypal force. You had unconsciously tuned into one of those deeper radio stations and allowed its frequency to express through your consciousness. This is your natural birthright. The God forms aren't foreign entities you need to invoke. They're aspects of your own psychological inheritance, passed down through the collective unconscious from the dawn of human consciousness. Every culture in history has recognized these same archetypal patterns, giving them different names and stories, but acknowledging their universal presence in human experience. The second critical shift that transforms your relationship with these archetypal forces involves completely redefining what most people call meditation or spiritual practice. While conventional approaches teach you to empty your mind or observe your thoughts, God form embodiment requires you to fill your consciousness with archetypal presence until your individual identity dissolves into divine identity. Most people approach inner work with what I call tourist consciousness. They visit spiritual states briefly, then return to their ordinary awareness unchanged. They meditate for 20 minutes, have a pleasant experience, then spend the rest of their day operating from the same limited patterns of thought and behavior. This is like visiting a foreign country for an hour and expecting to become fluent in the language. True archetypal embodiment requires what the ancient Greeks called ecstasis, literally meaning to stand outside oneself. You must be willing to temporarily dissolve the boundaries of your personal identity and allow an archetypal force to consciousness to express through your entire being. This isn't about maintaining a safe distance from the experience, it's about complete psychological immersion. The mechanism behind this transformation lies in what modern psychology calls state-dependent learning. When you're in a particular psychological state, you have access to memories, capabilities, and ways of thinking that aren't available in other states. The shy person who becomes confident when drunk isn't just chemically disinhibited. They're accessing aspects of their personality that exist but are normally suppressed by their default identity. God form embodiment takes this principle to its ultimate expression. When you fully embody an archetypal pattern, you gain access to all the psychological resources associated with that archetype. Embodying Athena doesn't just make you feel wise, it actually activates neural pathways associated with strategic thinking, pattern recognition, and intuitive knowing. You begin to think, perceive, and respond as wisdom itself. The logical mind often resists this process because it threatens the ego's sense of control. Your rational mind wants to understand exactly how this works, to maintain some kind of oversight over the process. But archetypal embodiment requires what the alchemists called solve et coagula, dissolve and reconstitute. You must allow your normal sense of self to dissolve so that the archetypal form can coagulate in its place. This is why most people hit a wall in their spiritual development. They want transformation, but they're not willing to temporarily die to their current identity. They want to add spiritual experiences to their existing self, rather than allowing their existing self to be fundamentally altered. It's like wanting to become a butterfly while insisting on remaining a caterpillar. The ancient mystery schools understood that this resistance is natural and developed specific practices to overcome it. They used music, dance, ritual, and altered states of consciousness to bypass the rational mind's defenses and create openings for archetypal possession. Modern practitioners can achieve similar results through intensive visualization, breathing techniques, and what I call identity shifting protocols. Common mental blocks that prevent successful God form embodiment include the fear of losing yourself permanently, the belief that claiming divine power is arrogant or blasphemous, and the assumption that such practices are dangerous or delusional. These blocks exist because the ego correctly recognizes that archetypal embodiment threatens its dominance over consciousness. But here's the truth: the ego doesn't want you to understand. You can't lose your authentic self through this practice because your authentic self is archetypal. The limited, fearful, constantly worried identity you think of as yourself is actually the false self, a psychological defense mechanism that developed to help you survive in a world that punished authentic archetypal expression. The practical mental shift required is this: stop thinking of yourself as a fixed identity trying to improve or grow, and start understanding yourself as a field of consciousness capable of embodying various archetypal patterns. You're not John or Mary trying to become more confident. You're infinite awareness exploring what it's like to express through the archetype of the warrior, the king, or the goddess. The third method I'll share with you involves a specific technique that elite performers throughout history have used to access superhuman capabilities, though most of them never understood the archetypal principles behind their success. From Olympic athletes to master artists to visionary leaders, those who achieve extraordinary results have learned to embody archetypal patterns that transcend normal human limitations. Recent neuroscience research has revealed something extraordinary about what happens in the brain during peak performance states. When athletes, artists, or entrepreneurs are operating at their highest level, brain scans show dramatically different patterns of neural activity. The default mode network, the brain's narrator that usually provides running commentary on experience, goes almost completely quiet. Meanwhile, other brain regions associated with intuition, pattern recognition, and embodied knowledge become hyperactive. This neurological shift corresponds exactly to what the ancient magi described as successful God form embodiment. The chattering ego mind falls silent while archetypal intelligence floods through consciousness. The performer is no longer trying to achieve results through personal effort. They've become a conduit for archetypal forces that operate with precision and power beyond individual capability. Here's the step-by-step process for archetypal performance embodiment. First, identify the specific archetypal pattern that corresponds to your desired outcome. If you're preparing for a business negotiation, you might choose to embody Hermes, the divine messenger and negotiator. For a creative project, you might embody Apollo, the god of artistic inspiration. For a leadership challenge, you might embody Athena, the goddess of wisdom and strategy. Second, spend 15 to 20 minutes in intensive archetypal visualization. Don't just think about the God form, become it. See through its eyes, feel its presence in your body, adopt its posture and bearing. Ancient Egyptian texts describe how priests would spend hours before temple ceremonies, visualizing themselves as the gods they were about to represent, until the distinction between priest and deity completely dissolved. Third, carry this embodied presence into your actual performance. Don't drop the archetypal identity when you leave your preparation space. Maintain it throughout the challenge or task. Elite athletes often describe feeling like they're in the zone or channeling something beyond themselves. They're unconsciously accessing archetypal patterns of the divine athlete, the warrior, or the champion. Fourth, notice how reality responds differently to your archetypal presence. When you're truly embodying a God form, other people unconsciously recognize the archetypal energy and respond accordingly. The person embodying divine authority naturally commands respect. The person channeling the lover archetype naturally attracts romantic interest. The person expressing through the creator archetype naturally manifests opportunities for creative expression. The most common mistake people make with this technique is maintaining too much self-conscious awareness during the process. They're so worried about doing it right or looking foolish that they never fully commit to the embodiment. True archetypal possession requires what improvisational actors call full commitment. You must be willing to completely inhabit the role without holding back. Another frequent error is choosing archetypal patterns based on what the ego thinks it wants rather than what the situation actually requires. The ego might want to embody the warrior for every challenge, but sometimes the situation calls for the sage, the lover, or the healer. Learning to diagnose which archetypal energy is needed takes practice and intuitive development. The third mistake is dropping the embodiment too quickly. Many people can access archetypal states briefly, but then immediately return to ordinary consciousness out of fear or unfamiliarity. The most powerful results come from maintaining archetypal presence for extended periods, hours, or even days for major life transitions. Start implementing this technique today by choosing one archetypal pattern that corresponds to a current challenge in your life. Spend the next 3 days practicing embodying this God form for at least 20 minutes each morning, then carrying the present into your daily activities. Notice how your behavior, thoughts, and even your physical bearing begin to shift as the archetypal pattern becomes more integrated into your consciousness. The fourth method involves creating a systematic process for long-term archetypal that programs your unconscious mind for sustained transformation. While the previous techniques work with temporary embodiment, this system creates permanent changes in your psychological structure by installing new archetypal patterns as default programs in your unconscious operating system. Think of your psyche like a computer with various software programs running automatically in the background. Most people are operating on outdated programs installed during childhood. Programs like I'm not good enough, life is struggle, or I have to work hard for everything. These unconscious programs determine how you perceive reality, what opportunities you notice, and how you respond to challenges. The systematic archetypal integration process works by installing new programs based on divine archetypal patterns. Instead of running the struggling human program, you begin operating on the divine creator. Instead of the limited individual software, you install the unlimited archetypal presence operating system. The technical mechanism behind this transformation involves what neuroscientists call memory reconsolidation. Every time you recall a memory or activate a neural pathway, it becomes temporarily malleable and can be modified before being restored to long-term storage. by repeatedly activating archetypal states while simultaneously accessing old limiting patterns. You literally psychological programming at the neurological level. Here's the step-by-step systematic process. Week 1. Conduct a thorough audit of your current. Identify the limiting beliefs, emotional patterns, and behavioral tendencies that characterize your default identity. Write them down specifically, not just "I lack confidence," but "when I enter new social situations, I feel my chest tighten, I look at the floor, and I think, these people are probably more interesting than me." Week 2. Choose 3 primary archetypal patterns that represent the transformation you desire. Don't just pick gods you find intellectually interesting. Choose archetypes that embody the exact qualities you want to develop. If your default program runs on insecurity and people-pleasing, you might choose to install the Solar King archetype, divine authority, the warrior archetype, boundaries and strength, and the magician archetype, transformation and power. Weeks 3 through 8 engage in daily archetypal installation sessions. Each morning, spend 30 minutes in deep visualization, fully embodying one of your chosen archetypes. But here's the critical element. While you're in the archetypal state, deliberately recall situations where your old programming would normally activate. See yourself handling those same situations from the archetypal, feeling the different emotions, thinking different thoughts, taking different actions. This process literally rewrites the neural pathways associated with those triggering situations. Instead of automatically activating the old limiting response, your brain begins to default to the archetypal response pattern. The shy person who consistently visualizes embodying divine confidence while recalling social situations gradually develops new neural pathways that automatically activate confidence in those contexts. Weeks 9 through 12 focus on environmental and behavioral integration. Begin making changes in your external life that support and reinforce your new archetypal identity. If you're integrating the warrior archetype, you might take up martial arts, change your posture and speaking patterns, or redecorate your living space with images that evoke warrior energy. The before and after transformation scenarios are often dramatic. I've worked with business executives who went from anxious people pleasers to commanding leaders by integrating Solar King archetypes. Artists who broke through creative blocks that had lasted years by embodying creator god forms. Individuals stuck in toxic relationships who completely transformed their relationship patterns by embodying self-sufficient archetypal forms like Artemis or Horus. Why does this system work when other approaches fail? Because it operates at the same deep level where your limiting programming was originally installed. Childhood experiences that created limiting beliefs didn't just affect your conscious thoughts, they created unconscious neural patterns that automatically govern your responses to similar situations. Surface-level techniques like affirmations or positive thinking can't override these deep patterns because they're working at the wrong level of consciousness. The most important element for preventing self-sabotage during this process is understanding that your ego will resist the transformation intensely. As you begin to embody archetypal patterns consistently, your old identity will feel threatened and will generate various forms of internal resistance, doubt, fear, physical symptoms, or external crises designed to pull you back into familiar patterns. Recognize this resistance as confirmation that the process is working. The stronger the resistance, the more significant the transformation taking place. Prepare for this resistance by developing what I call archetypal loyalty, the commitment to maintain your new identity regardless of temporary emotional discomfort or external challenges. The fifth and final method involves creating immediate physical engagement that anchors archetypal embodiment in your body and generates unstoppable momentum for continued transformation. While the previous methods work primarily with consciousness and visualization, this technique uses physical action to lock in the archetypal patterns at the cellular level. Ancient mystery schools understood something that modern psychology is rediscovering. The body is not separate from consciousness, but is consciousness made manifest in physical form. When you change your physical patterns, your posture, movement, breathing, and gestures, you automatically shift your psychological state. The inverse is also true. Sustained psychological transformation requires corresponding changes in physical patterns. This is why archetypal embodiment that remains purely mental or visualized often fails to create lasting change. Without physical anchoring, the archetypal experience remains a temporary, altered state, rather than becoming a new way of being. But when you engage your body in the process, you create what neuroscientists call embodied cognition, thoughts and feelings that are literally embedded in your physical structure. Here are multiple implementation options for physical archetypal embodiment. The first approach involves creating daily movement practices that express your chosen archetypal energy. If you're embodying a warrior archetype, you might practice martial arts forms, strength training, or aggressive dance movements. For goddess archetype, you might engage in flowing dance, yoga sequences, or sensual movement practices. The second option involves transforming your physical environment to support archetypal presence. Ancient temples were specifically designed to evoke particular god forms through architecture, symbols, colors, and sacred objects. You can create similar effects by designing your living or working space to reflect your chosen archetypal energy, using colors, symbols, artwork, and objects that resonate with the god form you're embodying. A third approach involves voice and speech pattern modifications. Each archetype has characteristic ways of speaking, the depth, rhythm, pace, and tone that naturally express that particular divine energy. Practice speaking as your chosen god form until the vocal patterns become automatic. Ancient Egyptian priests underwent years of training to master the vocal embodiment of their temple deities. Historical and cultural validation for these practices exists across every civilization. Egyptian temple rituals included elaborate physical ceremonies where priests and priestesses literally became the gods through costume, makeup, movement, and gesture. Greek mystery schools used dance, music, and physical ordeals to induce divine possession states. Hindu traditions developed intricate systems of mudras, hand gestures, asanas, body postures, and breathing techniques to embody various deity aspects. Indigenous shamanic traditions worldwide use drumming, dancing, costume, and physical transformation to embody spirit guides and power animals. Even modern therapeutic approaches like drama therapy and dance therapy work with similar principles, using physical embodiment to access psychological resources that remain unavailable through talking alone. The immediate engagement opportunity I'm offering you right now is this: stand up, take 3 deep breaths, and spend the next 5 minutes physically embodying your ideal archetypal form. Don't just visualize it, move as it would move, stand as it would stand, breathe as it would breathe. Feel the energy of this divine presence filling your body and radiating outward into your environment. Notice how this physical embodiment immediately shifts your emotional state, your thoughts, and your sense of what's possible. This is just a taste of what becomes available when you commit to sustained physical archetypal practice. The body learns quickly, and within days of consistent practice, you'll find yourself naturally moving through the world with archetypal presence. The power of physical action exceeds mental practice alone because the body communicates directly with the unconscious mind through what researchers call proprioceptive feedback. When you consistently move, breathe, and gesture in archetypal patterns, you're literally training your nervous system to default to those states automatically. The transformation becomes embodied rather than just conceptual. Timing and frequency recommendations for maximum effectiveness. Practice your chosen physical archetypal embodiment for a minimum of 15 minutes every morning and evening. Morning practice sets your energetic template for the day, while evening practice integrates the experiences of the day and programs your unconscious for continued transformation during sleep. For accelerated results, engage in longer sessions once or twice per week, hour-long periods where you fully immerse yourself in physical archetypal expression through movement, voice, gesture, and environmental interaction. These extended sessions create breakthrough moments where the archetypal identity begins to feel more natural than your ordinary personality. The momentum building aspect of this practice cannot be overstated. Each time you engage in physical archetypal embodiment, you strengthen the neural pathways associated with that divine identity. Like physical exercise that builds muscle memory, archetypal exercise builds what we might call God form memory, automatic patterns of divine presence that require no conscious effort to maintain. As this momentum builds, you'll notice that maintaining archetypal presence becomes effortless, while falling back into limited identity patterns feels increasingly uncomfortable and unnatural. This is the point where transformation becomes irreversible, when your new archetypal identity feels more real and authentic than your old limited self ever did. Most importantly, as you develop this physical practice, you'll discover that archetypal embodiment isn't something you do temporarily to achieve specific goals. It becomes your natural way of being in the world. You're not a human occasionally playing God, you're a divine being temporarily expressing through human form, and now you're simply remembering who you've always been. The psychology of successful implementation requires a fundamental shift from victim consciousness to creator consciousness, from believing that life happens to you to understanding that you are the divine force through which life expresses itself. This isn't positive thinking or spiritual bypassing. This is recognizing the archetypal truth of your own nature. When you truly understand archetypal embodiment, you realize that you've never been the small, limited, struggling person you thought you were. That identity was always just a role you were playing, a costume you were wearing, a character you were acting. The God forms you're learning to embody aren't foreign entities you're invoking. They're aspects of your own true nature that you're finally allowing to express. This recognition transforms your entire relationship with personal development and spiritual growth. Instead of trying to improve or fix your limited self, you simply choose which aspect of your infinite divine nature you want to express in any given moment. Instead of working toward becoming worthy of your desires, you recognize that as a divine being, you're already worthy of everything you could possibly want. The old paradigm taught you to build confidence gradually through small successes and positive experiences. The archetypal paradigm reveals that confidence is simply one of many divine qualities you can embody instantly when you choose to express true confident archetypes. You don't become confident, you discover that confidence is one of the many faces of your eternal self. This shift eliminates the internal struggle that characterizes most people's relationship with change and growth. When you know your infinite consciousness temporarily playing limited roles, you can change roles as easily as an actor changes costumes. Previous attempts at transformation may have failed because you were trying to change your essential nature, rather than simply choosing to express different aspects of your already perfect divine self. The language pattern that supports this transformation is crucial. Instead of saying, "I'm trying to become more confident," you say, "I'm choosing to express my natural divine confidence." Instead of, "I hope this works," you say, "I'm remembering who I really am." Instead of, "maybe I can change," you say, "I'm already everything I desire to be." This isn't semantic game playing. Language patterns literally program your unconscious mind and nervous system. When you use language that assumes limitation and gradual progress, you reinforce neural pathways associated with struggle and inadequacy. When you use language that assumes divine nature and immediate availability, you activate neural pathways associated with power and unlimited potential. The moment you fully embrace this archetypal understanding of yourself, everything changes. You stop waiting for permission to be powerful because you recognize that power is your natural state. You stop seeking approval from others because you know that as a divine being, you're the source of all approval. You stop fearing failure because you understand that infinite consciousness cannot fail. It can only have different experiences. This transformation is available to you right now, in this moment, as you absorb these words. You don't need years of practice or gradual development. You simply need to choose right now to stop identifying with limitation and start expressing through your archetypal nature. The gods have been waiting within you your entire life for this moment of recognition and embodiment. Are you ready to step into your true nature as an archetypal being? Are you willing to release the comfortable prism of limited identity and embrace the unlimited power that is your birthright? The ancient magi knew that this choice, the choice to embody divine consciousness, is the most important decision any human being can make. What we've explored together represents a return to humanity's most ancient and powerful technology for consciousness transformation. The mystery schools that flourished thousands of years ago possessed knowledge that modern psychology is only beginning to rediscover. But you now have access to this wisdom, refined and updated for contemporary understanding and application. The choice before you mirrors the choice that has faced every potential initiate throughout history. Will you remain content with the limited identity that society has convinced you is real? Or will you claim your birthright as a divine being capable of embodying any archetypal pattern you choose? Will you continue struggling as a fragmented human, or will you step into the unlimited power of your archetypal self? Remember, you're not learning to become something new. You're remembering something eternal. The God forms were never separate from you. They were always aspects of your own infinite consciousness, waiting for you to recognize them and give them expression. Every moment of struggle, every feeling of limitation, every sense of powerlessness has been nothing more than forgetting who you really are. Now you remember, now you choose, now you embody the divine truth that has always been your deepest nature. Welcome home, God in human form. Welcome to your true life as an archetypal being. The ancient magi are smiling, for another divine consciousness has awakened to its own unlimited nature.